The neighborhood had always been quiet, tucked into a suburban haven where the lawns were meticulously trimmed and every house matched the next like someone had copied and pasted them into existence. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened, until it did. It started on a Tuesday, right around midday. The sun hung heavily in the sky, the heat wrapping everything in a shimmering haze. Inside one particular two-story home at the end of the cul-de-sac, a mother sat beside her child's bed, watching the soft rise and fall of his chest. 11-year-old Jacob had been bedridden for nearly a year, his body weakened by a rare degenerative condition that stole more than just his mobility. Machines surrounded his hospital-style bed, humming a constant, fragile melody of beeps and whirs. The most important of them all was the ventilator, an unassuming gray box with blinking lights and a thick cable that ran to an outdoor generator. Power outages weren't common in this neighborhood, but they didn't take chances. After an incident last fall when the power briefly went out during a thunderstorm, they'd invested in a backup generator. It sat just behind the house, humming gently, doing its job without complaint, until today. The first sign of trouble was the silence. It crept in like a fog, sudden and absolute. The machines stopped. No beeps, no hums. The ventilator died. Panic rose in the mother's chest as she leapt from her chair and rushed to the window. She spotted the cord leading from the generator had been yanked clean out, violently. A shrill voice carried from behind the fence. "I told you people about this eyesore. The WA has rules." It was Karen. Every neighborhood has a Karen, and this one was no different. She was the self-appointed enforcer of the WA, clipboard in hand, scowl locked onto her face like it had been cemented there. But this wasn't a matter of trash cans left out or garden gnomes deemed too tacky. This was life or death. The mother didn't hesitate. She lunged for her phone and dialed 911, hands trembling as she gave their address, her voice shaking but precise. "My son. He's on life support. Our generator was unplugged. He's not breathing. The neighbor." She cut it. "Please, send help." Dispatch confirmed they were sending someone. The mother dropped the phone and scrambled back to Jacob, manually assisting his breathing as best she could. He was conscious but fading, eyes rolling back, his small frame struggling against the betrayal of his own body. Karen didn't leave. In fact, she strutted around the side of the house with a smug expression and a phone in hand. "I warned you about non-compliant modifications," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "That generator violates Section 4 of the Exterior Uniformity Code. It's an eyesore. I gave you written notice. You people just don't listen." The mother didn't even hear her anymore. Her focus was on Jacob, on every second that ticked by. Each moment without air was a moment stolen from him. Every second felt like an hour. The machines weren't restarting. The battery backup had been exhausted last month and hadn't yet been replaced due to a backorder. Now, they were relying on human desperation. 2 minutes after the call to 911, chaos erupted. The sound of boots on pavement. A loud bang on the front door. Then another. Then splinters as it burst open. SWAT, armed, trained, and clearly briefed. They swarmed in, shouting commands, rifles raised but careful. The mother raised her hands instinctively, her face a mask of shock and exhaustion. "In the bedroom. He's dying. Please." One officer immediately ran to Jacob while another assessed the generator situation. Within seconds, someone had pulled the cord back in, and the machine wheezed back to life. The ventilator clicked, then beeped. Air returned to Jacob's lungs. His chest began to rise again. His fingers twitched. A small sound escaped his mouth. A weak groan, but a sound nonetheless. Karen stood frozen at the edge of the yard as another officer approached her. "Ma'am, you're under arrest." Her face twisted in confusion. "For what?" "I was enforcing the WA rules. Tampering with life-saving medical equipment. Reckless endangerment. Possibly attempted manslaughter. You don't get to decide whether someone lives or dies because of a generator." "I didn't know," she screeched. "No one told me he was sick." "You were told. Multiple times. It's on record with the WA board and with medical exception paperwork you personally signed last year." Karen's face drained of color. The clipboard fell from her hands and hit the grass. Meanwhile, paramedics arrived. Jacob was stabilized and loaded into the back of the ambulance. The mother climbed in after him, clutching his hand as though she could pull him back to the living world by sheer will. Back inside the house, the SWAT team cleared each room, ensuring there were no further threats. It wasn't until later that the body camera footage would show just how fast it had all happened, just how quickly an ordinary day had turned into a matter of life and death. It would also show how composed the mother had been under pressure, how reckless Karen had been in her ignorance, and how swift the officers had responded once the nature of the call was understood. News spread fast. By evening, a small crowd had formed outside the house, a mixture of neighbors, media, and emergency personnel. Some had come out of concern. Others, curiosity. Many were angry, furious that someone from their own street could have done something so thoughtless, so dangerous. Karen was taken into custody. She didn't resist, but she didn't stop talking either. All the way into the back of the squad car, she kept repeating, "I didn't know, I didn't know." But ignorance is no excuse, not when a child's life is on the line. Jacob survived that day, barely. He would spend another week in the hospital recovering from the trauma his body endured. His mother stayed by his side the entire time, refusing to leave, even once. The generator, now fitted with a lockbox and posted with bright red warning signs, continued its steady hum. The HOA board met in emergency session and unanimously voted to strip Karen of all authority, pending legal proceedings. The neighborhood changed after that. People paid closer attention. They asked more questions. They looked out for one another, not just their lawns or the placement of their trash bins. And though things eventually returned to some semblance of normal, one truth remained etched into everyone's memory. It only takes a moment, 2 minutes, even, for someone's entire world to change. It had been a week since the incident, but the echoes of that day still pulsed through the neighborhood like an unspoken current. The once pristine calm had been punctured, permanently. People still walked their dogs and waved politely from their driveways, but now their smiles were tight, their conversations shorter. The events surrounding Jacob had shaken something loose in all of them, something they hadn't realized was fragile until it had cracked open. Jacob was home again. His bed had been moved closer to the window, and a new state-of-the-art backup system had been installed, funded not only by the mother's insurance but through a hastily arranged community fundraiser. What was originally intended to be a gesture of sympathy quickly transformed into something more, penance. Neighbors who had once turned a blind eye to Karen's antics now knocked on the door with casseroles and grocery bags. Offering more than just food, they offered recognition. They saw what had happened. They knew they'd let it get too far. Inside, Jacob was recovering slowly. He hadn't spoken much since returning. He was conscious, alert even, but quieter than before. His mother didn't press him. She simply stayed close, speaking to him about the mundane, the weather, the birds outside the window, the dreams she hoped he was still having. She kept her voice soft and steady, a tether to normalcy. Karen, meanwhile, had posted bail, but her world had already collapsed. She was suspended from her HOA position, pending a full investigation. Her own neighbors began avoiding her entirely. No one waved anymore. Cars parked farther from her house. Her once pristine lawn, famously measured and trimmed to regulation standards, now had browning patches where the sprinkler had stopped working. Whether due to neglect or sabotage, no one could say. The charges against her were serious. Reckless endangerment, interference with medical equipment. Some wanted attempted manslaughter added, though that would take a grand jury. Her lawyer insisted it had all been a misunderstanding, that Karen had only acted in accordance with HOA bylaws, never with malicious intent. But intent mattered little when Jacob had nearly died. The mother had remained mostly silent in the days that followed. She declined interviews, rejected offers from news stations, and refused to be paraded across social media. But her silence was not passive. She was documenting, organizing, preparing. There were emails, videos, and voice memos. She had everything. Copies of the medical exception form submitted to the HOA, Karen's signature included. Notes from previous warnings, including one voice message from Karen herself. "Your generator is ruining the view from my kitchen window. I don't care what you say he needs. There are rules." Lawyers took notice. Advocacy groups reached out. One particularly influential disability rights attorney offered to represent her pro bono, recognizing that this wasn't just about Jacob. This was about the broader systems that empowered people like Karen to wield power without consequence, until there was one. The civil suit came first. The mother filed it quietly but precisely. Negligence, emotional distress, violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The WA itself was named, along with Karen personally. The suit alleged that not only had Karen violated her authority by physically tampering with life-sustaining equipment, but the WA had failed to act despite documented complaints and medical exemptions. The community was split. Some defended Karen, claiming she had just gone too far this time, but others saw it for what it was, a culmination. An entire neighborhood had enabled a woman